All right, who can tell me what this, anyone seen something like this before? Anybody know what this is? No? No? Okay. This is a wick. This purple or pinkish part here is the actual wick. And it sits on these, which are made out of cork, and it floats on those. In a lamp, in an oil lamp like this, this is full of olive oil. And this will sit on top and float in there, and you can light it, and it will burn that olive oil. Now look what we have at our church. Above the icons, we have these very nice electric lights. We're high-tech here. We have electric lights over top of the icons. When I was at seminary in Boston, Holy Cross School of Theology, we didn't have electric lights like that. We were low-tech there. We didn't have electric lights over top of the icons. Instead, we had oil lamps like this. And every day we would have to refill the olive oil that was in those lamps. And every day we would have to put a new wick into these little floaters. See, these wicks just come right out. So every day we'd have to put a new wick into those floaters. Now I want to show you something that I learned when I was there, and I'm hoping this is going to work right. Right now, look, I have only a little tiny bit of wick at the bottom, right? And I have a lot of wick at the top. See? All right, so I'm going to light this, and we're going to see how it goes. Here we go. See, it floats on top of the olive oil like that, and then we can light it. It's an oil lamp, exactly, yep. And it's going to light. And because I have a lot of wick sticking out the top, that flame, see how big that flame is getting? See, it's getting really, really high. And what's going to happen with a flame that's that high on a lamp like this? Oh yeah, take a look. Come here. See how high that flame is getting because I had a whole bunch of wick sticking out there? And see how it's also kind of flickering a lot? It's kind of moving around. It's not sitting still very much. Well, what's going to happen with that, I'll blow that out really quick. What's going to happen with a big flame like that, with a lot of wick, is that the olive oil is going to burn up a lot quicker. And so that lamp is going to go out sooner than it should. And it's also because that big flame is always flickering around and things like that. It's not very peaceful looking, and sometimes it smokes a little bit if there's too much wick. So you don't want it to burn quite that much. But watch what happens if I put too little wick. Now I'm going to do just a tiny, see there's just a tiny little bit of wick sticking out the top there, and there's a bunch of wick at the bottom. I'm going to have to clean my hands off after this sermon. Always a good sermon if you have to clean your hands afterwards. Look, with a tiny little bit of wick, it won't even light. Or sometimes it might light and you'll think it's okay, but there's so little wick that then it'll burn out. Within just the wick will just go out within a few minutes. What was that?
The fraction of a millisecond?
Yeah, really quick. So watch what happens now if we have balance. See, now we have a little bit of wick at the bottom and a little bit of wick at the top. Just enough. And let's see if this works right. Should light. And you have to kind of experiment with it a little bit. If you have something like this at home, sometimes you have to play with it a little bit to get just the right amount of wick. So let's push a little bit out more, and let's light that. There we go. Now we have a small little flame. And what's going to happen with that small little flame is it's just big enough for it to stay lit so that it won't go out. But not too big that it burns through the oil too quick. So this lamp then will stay lit, stay burning for a lot longer.
Like an hour?
More than an hour. We would only refill them once a day. It would stay lit all day just from that one little wick. So that's what you need, is a small, still, quiet, peaceful little flame. Remember, the big flame was dancing all over the place, going crazy, and it didn't look very peaceful. But this nice little small flame is very peaceful, and it's not going to go out, and it's very still, and it's just enough so that then when it's sitting above one of the icons, in that light, you see the face of Christ. Okay? All right, go ahead and sit down. I'll leave this all right here for the moment, but go ahead and sit down. So, all of us have in our heart the light of Jesus Christ. All of us, on the day we were baptized, received into our heart Christ himself. Jesus Christ himself, who the Gospel of John tells us is the light of the world, who came into the world to illuminate all men, to make all of us shine. That's why Jesus Christ came into the world, is to make all of us shine brightly, to illuminate each and every one of us. And that same Jesus Christ, that same light of the world, is living within each and every one of our hearts. Because of our baptism, he enters into us. He comes to be with us, right there at the depth of who we are, right there in our heart. Jesus Christ himself dwells. But many of us, unfortunately, we go through life in a way blind to Jesus Christ's presence within us. We go through life unaware of the light that shines within us. We cover over that light in so many different ways. And one of the ways that we love to cover over Christ's presence within us is through making our lives, about to fall off the steps here, through making our lives, see, I don't have my podium in front of me this time, is by making our lives very noisy. We try to cover over Christ's presence within us by filling our lives with lots of things that don't end up being helpful to us, but just end up being noise, static in our lives. I know my experience, and I'm sure many of you have felt this before, that if you have a few minutes at home to yourself, and the kids are gone, there's nothing going on, there's some nice peace and quiet in the house, often the first thing you want to do is turn the TV on, turn the radio on. Why? Because we can't stand to be alone with ourselves. We can't stand to be alone with our thoughts. We don't want to go there. We're worried about what we would find, what kind of darkness we would find within ourselves if we had a few moments of silence. And so our life of prayer very often begins with cutting off that noise, with allowing ourselves to be by ourselves, allowing ourselves to be in a place of silence and stillness. But we find all too often that once you get a little bit of physical peace and quiet, once you get a place where there's no noise going on physically around you, you find that actually there's no quiet within yourself. There's no peace and stillness within your own mind and within your own heart. If you've ever tried to just sit in silence and not think about anything, this is it's hard enough to get some physical silence, let alone silence within our own mind, within our own heart. But this is what we need in order to pray. We read in scriptures that Christ comes to us as that still, small voice. Christ, who is dwelling within our heart, doesn't always make himself obvious within us. And so we will be blind to his presence unless we are able to quiet down a little bit, unless we're able to still our own thoughts and get a little bit of peace within our own heart. And then in that peace and in that silence, we can encounter Christ who dwells within us, Christ who is the light within us, the light that illuminates the whole world. On the day of the Transfiguration, and it might seem strange to you that I'm referencing the Transfiguration right now, but you'll understand why. On the day of the Transfiguration, Christ led the apostles up onto Mount Tabor, to the peak of Mount Tabor. Peter, James, and John. He brought them up to the peak of Mount Tabor. And there they saw, even if just for a moment, there they saw Christ's glory. They saw that he is the light of the world. They saw him surrounded by this brilliant light, which is his presence, which is his glory. That light is nothing else than the presence of Jesus Christ. They experienced the glory that Christ has on that day. But on the day of the Transfiguration, nothing changed about Jesus Christ. Instead, what happened on the day of the Transfiguration was that the apostles' eyes were opened to see the glory that he always had, the glory that was always there with him. And they saw that glory as this tremendous light of his presence. Well, that same light, exactly that same light that the apostles saw on Mount Tabor, is the light of Jesus Christ that dwells within each and every one of us. That light that dwells within us, that illumines any dark place within us, if we will allow him to. And so we come to our Lord Jesus Christ by looking within our own heart, by seeking out his presence there. And we try to still our lives down, make our lives like that small, still, peaceful flame, just enough to cast its light. And in that light, just like with the icons, in that light we see the face of Christ. And so as we look within ourselves in prayer, and as we try through God's grace to still down our thoughts, to bring a little bit of peace and quiet within our own heart, then we encounter dwelling within us the light of Christ who illumines all people. This is essentially a boiled down version of what St. Gregory Palamas, who is the saint who we celebrate today, taught. Every year on the second Sunday of Holy Lent, we celebrate St. Gregory Palamas. And he taught very clearly about the light that dwells within each one of us, a light that we, through the grace of God, can experience through prayer in a heart that is full of peace, of silence, and of stillness. Now I want to say just a little bit about our gospel reading today. And it might not seem clear how our gospel reading for today, this story of the healing of the paralytic, how this connects with St. Gregory Palamas. And the reason why that doesn't seem obvious is because historically the gospel readings for Lent were set very early on. And the saints that are commemorated on those Sundays were only set later. So it's not necessarily an intentional connection between the gospel reading and the saint who's celebrated. But I want to say just a little bit about this gospel reading. Because what happens? Jesus is teaching in a house, and the crowds have come out to see him. He's surrounded by all these people who want to hear from him. And there's a man who is a paralytic who is seeking healing from Jesus Christ. But he couldn't get to Christ because there was too many people in the way. He couldn't get to the Lord Jesus Christ to be healed by him. So thankfully he had some very good friends. And his friends took him and carried him, and they cut a hole in the roof of the house to lower him down right in front of Jesus. And Jesus knew what to do, and he offered the grace of his healing to this man who was so desperately in need. Now I want to say just a little bit about a man that I met down in Tulsa when I was down there recently, Father Dan Sushu. Father Dan is a Romanian priest who has just an incredible story. We're only going to touch a little bit because there's so much we can say about his story. But Father Dan, for 15 years, he had had back problems, and he had had 9 separate failed surgeries on his back. And for 15 years, he was bedridden. He couldn't get out of his bed for more than 5 minutes at a time because the pain in his back was so incredibly unbearable. And he was on opioids to treat his pain. And of course, we know what opioids do. Opioids don't actually treat the source of the pain. They just keep us from realizing we're in pain. And so we end up moving in ways that really we shouldn't, and we end up damaging our bodies even more than they were damaged before. This is what happened to Father Dan. His back he had so much incredible pain for 15 years. 15 years. Well, and this was really only a few years back, he got a call from his relatives in Romania who said, Mom only has a little bit of time left. She had caught in COVID. Now you know this was really only a few years back. She'd been holding on for years. Really, she should have passed away years before this, but she hadn't. And they said, you really should come and see her. And Father Dan was thinking, how in the world? I can't be out of bed for 5 minutes. How in the world am I going to fly across the Atlantic Ocean to Romania to visit her? So he talked to his doctors about it, and they said, no, you can do it. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to put you on 4 times as many opioids as you're on right now. And that'll be enough that you can make the flight. So this is what Father Dan did. He took 4 times as many opioids, and he got on the flight, and he got over, and he was in incredible pain the entire time. But he made it to Romania to be there and to see his mom. Now, there was a priest in Romania, Father Arseni Boca, who is one of these. You have these incredible stories of priests in Romania who were in the prison camps under the Soviets because of their faith. Father Arseni was one of those people. And ever since he passed away, he was persecuted both by the government and also by the church, who was unfortunately in Romania. The church was under the control of the government at the time. He passed away, and ever since he passed away, every day, thousands and thousands of people come to the monastery where his grave is in order to venerate his grave and to ask for his prayers. Okay, so Father Dan is at home with his mom, with his family, still in incredible pain. And his brother says to him, while you're here, we should go out and visit Father Arseni's grave. Father Dan says, there's no way. It's out in the hills. It's a long car drive to get there. I'll be in too much pain. And his brother says, no, you can make it. You'll be fine. We'll do it. We'll make it. So he gets in the car, and he's in incredible pain, bumping along the road as they're driving to the monastery. Finally, they get there, and Father Dan is just in so much pain, and they look and they see in between them and the grave of Father Arseni, there's about 2,000 people who are in line. Father Dan says, there's no way I can get out of this car and wait for 2,000 people to be done to go up and venerate his grave. We should just turn around and go back home. And his brother said, no. We'll get out and we'll see what we can do. If it's not going to work, okay, but we're going to get out of the car and we'll just see what happens. So that they do that. They get out of the car, and Father Dan is so bent over. He's walking with a little cane, and he's so bent over he cannot stand up straight. He's like this. And the nuns at the monastery see him get out of his car, dressed in his andari and his robes and everything like that. They see him get out of the car, standing like that, and they say, "Oh, this poor priest! Look at this poor priest. He can't even hardly stand up. Let's let him skip the line. He can skip the line and come. He gets a fast pass, as it were, to come and venerate Father Arseni's grave." So as Father Dan is bent over like this, some of the nuns come over and his brother is helping, and they're helping him. They're holding him underneath the arms as he's walking carefully, slowly up to the grave of Father Arseni. When he gets to the grave, and with great care and with great difficulty, they help him to kneel in front of the grave of Father Arseni. And there, kneeling before his grave, he prays only for his mom. He doesn't pray for himself at all. He prays only for his mother. And having said that prayer, he stands up straight and he walks away. And after 15 years of being bedridden from that pain, he, after that, didn't have a single bit of back pain. And this, I think, illustrates the key of today's gospel reading, which on the one hand is the incredible healing grace that comes from Jesus Christ. Because, of course, it wasn't Father Arseni who healed Father Dan. It was Christ who healed Father Dan through Father Arseni's prayers. That incredible grace of healing that comes from Jesus Christ is a grace that exists even to this day. It's not something of the past. It's something that is still with us to this day. But the second thing I think that I want to take away from that story, along with today's gospel reading, is how important it is to have good friends. Because if Father Dan's brother hadn't insisted at every step of that journey, no, I believe that you can do this, then Father Dan would never have had that opportunity to receive that incredible, wonderful healing. And so today, as we're continuing, we have a question. Wonderful. I love it. What is it? His mom did end up passing away, and it was almost incredible because for years she had held on, and then when Father Dan came to see her, it was only a few months after that she passed away. So really she was waiting for Father Dan to come and see her there at the end of her life. Good question. That's what happened to his mom. Today, as we're continuing along the path of Great and Holy Lent, and as our Western brothers and sisters are celebrating Pascha today, celebrating Easter today, and of course for us as well, every Sunday is a little celebration of the resurrection. Every Sunday is a little Easter. Let us seek to come to God with a heart that is still and silent, and to seek His presence within us, to seek the grace that is still within each and every one of us. And there, when we experience the light of Christ that dwells within us, we see from that light that illumines all men that Christ is with us and will never leave us because of His love for each and every one of us. Amen.